the floor of Everline Tech Manufacturing, a sleek factory in Northern California, buzzed with the rhythm of automated machines. Steel arms swung in perfect sync. Conveyor belts hummed softly. Workers in blue uniforms moved quietly, efficiently. Among them was Rehan Malik, mid-30s, soft-spoken, immigrant, always early, always polite. He stood at Station 7, monitoring the calibrator system. A voice broke the air like chalk on a mirror. "Hey, button guy, you missed a scan." Everyone turned. At the end of the aisle stood CEO Martin Briggs. Crisp suit, shiny shoes, and a smirk that never left his face. Rehan looked up, startled. "Sir, the scan is already uploaded. System just lags sometimes." Martin raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think? Listen, buddy, you're not here to think. You're here to push buttons. Leave the systems talk to people who actually speak the language." A few team leads chuckled nervously. Rehan didn't respond. He just nodded and returned to the panel. But something behind his eyes shifted. Quiet didn't mean weak. The Everline team had been preparing for this day for weeks. Ms. Caldera, head of global investments from Geneva, was flying in for a surprise visit. A potential $40 million expansion deal hung in the balance. Everyone scrambled. Coffee orders, badges, rushed slide decks. Martin stood at the head of the polished conference table, rehearsing his pitch with a glass of sparkling water. "This deal is ours to lose, people. Let's not lose it because someone mispronounces a word or forgets how to smile." That last line was a jab, thinly veiled, directed at the factory staff he barely acknowledged. Rehan was walking past with a tablet in hand when he heard raised voices. Martin again. "No, he can't be in the presentation. I don't care if he helped design the layout. His English is barely passable." The HR manager tried to argue, but Ms. Caldera requested someone who understands the floor tech. "Rehan's our strongest operator." Martin scoffed. "She meant someone who can communicate. We don't need to embarrass ourselves in front of Europe." Rehan paused just outside the door, then walked away without a word. Ms. Caldera entered, graceful, sharp-eyed, and punctual. She greeted everyone in French-accented English. "Let's keep this honest and efficient, yes?" Martin smiled wide. Fake his glass. "Of course. Transparency is our motto." The pitch began. Slides rolled. Buzzwords filled the air. Automation, global scalability, real-time metrics. But something was missing. Depth. Then midway through, Ms. Caldera looked around. "You keep mentioning real-time diagnostics and floor feedback loops. I'd like to ask one of your operators directly. Who's in charge of line 7? Dead silence. Eyes darted. Martin froze. We don't usually bring floor workers into executive spaces." Ms. Caldera raised an eyebrow. "Then bring the executive who knows how line 7 works." More silence. Then the HR manager quietly stood and left the room. Rehan was back at his station, checking fault logs. The HR manager rushed in, breathless. "Rehan, they need you. In the boardroom. Now." He blinked. "Me? You." The door opened. Rehan entered, tablet still in hand, hands slightly trembling. His uniform stood in stark contrast to the Armani suits around the table. Martin groaned audibly. "This is Rehan Malik, one of our machine operators." Rehan stepped forward, offering a polite smile to Ms. Caldera. "Bonjour, madame. Je suis responsable pour la calibration en temps réel. Vos questions sont les bienvenues." The entire room paused. French. Fluent. Crisp. Effortless. Caldera lit up. "Oh, vous parlez français." Rehan nodded. "Et aussi un peu d'allemand, si nécessaire." Then, in flawless German, "Ich habe die Daten AUS den letzten 60 Tagen vorbereitet. Machten Sie die Radeten oder ein Zusammenfassung?" Martin looked like he had swallowed his own tie. "And yes," Rehan added, switching back to English smoothly, "I can explain the feedback loop systems, including the latency correction we implemented last quarter. I wrote the internal SOP for it." Ms. Caldera leaned back in her chair, smiling fully for the first time. "Now this is transparency. Rayhan was standing at the whiteboard, outlining a streamlined upgrade path that reduced machine downtime by 28%. He answered every question clearly, calmly, and in the language each investor preferred. When the meeting ended, Ms. Caldera shook his hand. "You didn't just save this deal," she said. "You defined it." Martin trailed behind, face pale. Caldera turned back and said, loudly enough for all to hear, "Next time, Mr. Briggs, don't underestimate the people who actually know how your company runs." Then she walked away. Martin stood frozen. Behind him, several staff members watched. No one laughed. No one had to. Factory floor, end of day. Rayhan walked back to his station. This time, people greeted him with nods, smiles, respect. A supervisor stopped him. "Hey, Rayhan, I think you just became the face of Everline." He smiled gently. "I'm just here to push buttons, remember?" But this time, it didn't sound small. It sounded powerful. Martin Briggs sat at the head of a long glass table, staring at his untouched black coffee. His charm had curdled into tension. Across from him sat Alan Cho, Everline's chief operating officer. Calm, clean cut, known for only one thing: results. "I read Ms. Caldera's report," Alan said, flipping through a slim folder. She wrote one sentence in bold. "Your CO almost cost you the deal." Rayhan Malik saved it. Martin shifted. "She's overreacting." It was a language novelty. Rayhan caught her attention. "That's all." Alan stared. He spoke 3 languages. Cited system data. Explained protocols you didn't even know existed. That's not a novelty. That's value. Martin scoffed. "He's a machine operator." Alan leaned in. "And you're the one who laughed at him for speaking passable English." I reviewed the security footage. "Do you know what it looks like when your CEO mocks an employee for their accent?" Silence. Then Alan dropped the bomb. "You're being placed under review. Your authority is suspended pending further HR inquiry. Effective immediately." Martin's jaw slackened. "You can't be serious. This company is my blood." Alan stood. "Then maybe you should have treated the people who built it like they were more than background noise." Rayhan sat alone, lunch tray untouched. News had spread fast. Some co-workers offer high fives. Some, unsure, just watched him pass in silence. He didn't want attention. He wanted to work. But then, the HR manager appeared at his table, smiling gently. "Rayhan, Alan Cho would like to see you." Rayhan entered carefully, wiping his hands on his uniform. Alan stood to greet him. "You probably didn't expect this kind of week." Rayhan smiled nervously. "No, sir." Alan gestured to the chair across from him. "You've been with Everline 6 years. Perfect record. Designed internal systems no one ever credited you for. Quietly corrected faults others missed. We never saw you as anything beyond Station 7. Rayhan didn't interrupt. "That's on us. But now we're correcting that." Alan slid a document across the table. "We want you to lead a new pilot program. It's called Ground Up Leadership, a rotating team made up of floor staff, trained and trusted to contribute at the policy level." Rayhan blinked. I've never run a team before." Alan smiled. "Neither had I, until someone gave me the chance. We want you to be the first floor operator promoted to senior systems coordinator. You'll design this program. Report directly to me." Rayhan stared at the paper. He wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. "Why me?" Alan paused. "Because when you walked into that boardroom, you didn't just speak 3 languages. You spoke truth, calmly, without ego. That's leadership. And frankly, we need more of it." Martin was walking out, a cardboard box in hand. Staff watched in awkward silence. From the opposite end of the hall, Rayhan walked in, holding a new badge clipped to a crisp white shirt. They crossed paths briefly. Martin looked him in the eyes, then muttered, "You're lucky. That investor liked your little show." Rayhan didn't flinch. She liked the truth. That's harder to fake. And he walked past. The first ground-up leadership session was underway. 10 workers, 5 from the floor, 5 from management, all seated at the same table. Rayhan stood at the whiteboard, confident now, We'll start by mapping real feedback loops from operators, not just numbers on a dashboard, because tech doesn't solve problems. People do. Everyone listened. No one smirked. A new sign had been hung above the main door. Efficiency without equity is just exploitation. Below it, Program Pilot Team, lead Rehan Malik. Martin sat across from two board members, suit wrinkled, pride bruised. I deserve a second chance, he pleaded. I built this company's growth model. The HR director opened her laptop. Yes, and you nearly destroyed a $40 million deal because of your ego. You mocked your own staff on record, refused inclusion at the executive table, and you repeatedly reduced a multilingual systems expert to a button guy. That's not leadership. That's negligence. Martin slumped in his seat. So that's it. No, she replied. That's justice. A reporter typed furiously under a headline. Factory worker speaks 3 languages. Saves deal, rewrites company culture. The article went viral within hours. People didn't just share it because it was dramatic. They shared it because it was true. A wide shot pans across the newsroom of a major media outlet. Bright lights, brisk energy. A large screen shows the headline. From factory floor to executive table, the Rehan Malik story. An anchor turns to the camera. In an age where diversity often feels like a buzzword, one man's humility and skill may have quietly redefined corporate leadership at one of America's fastest-growing tech manufacturers. Cut to a clip of Rehan on the Everline floor, guiding team members from various departments. He wasn't just managing now. He was mentoring. The monthly board meeting was underway. This time, there were new faces at the table, operators, technicians, and junior team members. Rehan sat mid-table, not at the head by choice. We launched ground-up leadership with 10 pilot members, Rehan reported. Productivity's up 12%. But that's not the real win. He clicked the remote. Turnover's down 40%. That means people want to stay. And not just because of pay, but because they feel seen. A senior VP frowned. Is this just emotional fluff or is it scalable? Rehan didn't flinch. You can't scale loyalty with spreadsheets, but you can create it with structure that respects people. Silence. Then Alan Cho, the COO, nodded slowly. I want the next division rollout modeled after Rehan's framework. Full budget, full access. Jessica, a mid-level HR staffer, had been working late when something caught her eye. An old performance report from 3 years ago. Rehan Malik, language barrier, slow communication, not management material. She blinked. The report had no signature. Another file, same thing. And another, this time for a woman named Priya Desai, now a senior engineer. Accent issues may cause discomfort in client-facing settings. Jessica frowned. She started pulling reports. Dozens, all referencing accents, communication challenges, cultural mismatch, all targeting immigrant employees. It wasn't isolated. It was a pattern. Jessica sat across from Rehan and Alan. She laid the files on the table. These weren't evaluations. They were character assassinations. And it's been happening for years. Alan flipped through them slowly. His jaw tightened. Rehan read one of his own past reports. A line stood out, eager to help, but not executive material due to accent and cultural background. He looked up. They didn't just underestimate us. They documented their bias. Alan closed the folder. We're calling for a full audit. The company issued a memo. Subject: formal investigation into cultural bias in prior performance reviews. Staff opened the email and gasped. Some felt vindicated. Others stunned. For years, these red flags were unspoken. Now they were being exposed. Martin Briggs sat alone in a cafe, scrolling through LinkedIn posts. Rehan Malik proves leadership isn't about language. It's about listening. Diversity isn't the future. It's the correction of the past. CEO mocks immigrant worker, gets replaced by him within months. Martin dropped the phone, rubbed his temples. He didn't lose the company because of one mistake. He lost it because he never listened. Rehan stood on stage at a leadership seminar. The room was full of students, faculty, and working professionals. No lights, no flashy intro. Just him and a mic. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just want to be respected for what I do, what I know. He paused. I didn't speak 3 languages to impress anyone. I did it because that's how I survived. Immigrants don't usually have a choice. We adapt or we vanish. A beat. But now, maybe we can start belonging, not just surviving. Standing ovation. New signs mark the walls. Suggestions box, now reviewed weekly by ops leads. Language workshops offered company-wide. Next leadership meeting, moderated by floor staff. People stopped whispering about Rayhan. Now they quoted him. The anchor turned back to camera. Everline's internal audit led to sweeping reforms, HR restructuring, diversity coaching, and, most surprisingly, a movement now being studied at business schools nationwide. On screen, the Rayhan model. The worker who was once laughed at for his accent now sits on an advisory council that rewrites what leadership training looks like in the post-corporate era. Rayhan sat with his wife. Their 2 kids climbing over the couch. No suits here. No cameras. His wife handed him a cup of chai. You've changed everything. Rayhan smiled. Not everything. Just what should have been obvious all along. The kids giggled in the background. Rayhan stood at a podium. Not on a factory floor this time, but beneath the UN seal, surrounded by global leaders, social entrepreneurs, and policymakers. Behind him, a massive screen read, "Dignity at Work," rewriting corporate narratives from the ground up. He spoke calmly. I was once the guy no one heard because my English wasn't polished enough, because my voice had an accent, because I didn't look like leadership. But here's the truth. People don't follow accents. They follow authenticity. Scattered applause turned to a rising ovation. A middle school teacher played Rayhan's UN speech to her students, mostly immigrant kids. One student raised her hand. "Miss, he talks like my dad, but he's on TV." The teacher smiled. "That's why we're watching this." The halls of the company, once known for quiet exclusion, now buzzed with transparent energy. A new department was unveiled, Employee Voices Initiative. It was run by 3 former factory staff members. One of them, Priya Desai, the engineer who was once told her accent would cause discomfort. Now, she mentored interns. Jessica, the HR rep who uncovered the systemic bias, was being interviewed. We always focus on policies, hiring quotas, language guidelines, but we never asked how people felt. Rayhan taught us to stop managing people like checklists and start treating them like culture carriers. Martin sat in front of a laptop, watching a podcast. Rayhan was the guest. I don't hate Martin. I don't wish him harm. He was raised in a system that told him success looks and sounds a certain way. But the world's bigger now, louder, and more beautiful in its difference. Martin shut the lid quietly. For the first time, he looked small. Rayhan sat with teens from immigrant families teaching public speaking. He spoke softly but with conviction. You don't have to sound American to be intelligent. You don't need fancy words to be a leader. What you need is courage to speak even when they laugh. One boy raised his hand. What if they say we don't belong? Rayhan smiled. Then speak until they have no choice but to hear you. A professor stood at the whiteboard. Today's case study, Rayhan Malik and the Everline turnaround. What made it historic? A student answered. He changed the story, not just for himself, but for everyone like him. Another chimed in. He didn't fight the system to destroy it. He rewrote it to include people who were always left out. The professor nodded. Exactly. That's not just leadership. That's legacy. Photos lined the shelves. Rayhan with his team, his family. A sign frame from the investor Caldera with the note. You gave us more than profits. You gave us perspective. He looked out the window. His desk was tidy. His title, Chief Equity and Systems Officer. Not because of a PR push, but because no one else knew how to build a system for everyone better than someone who had been excluded by it. A small theater crowd sat in silence as the documentary ended. On screen, Rayhan's final quote played. They laughed at my English. But now they're learning to speak my language, the language of respect, inclusion, and shared power. Fade to black. Rayhan Malik's leadership model is now taught in over 50 universities and has been adopted by 120 companies across 4 continents. Rayhan stood at the gate, passport in hand, wearing a soft grin. A child walked past, tugging her mom's sleeve. "Mom, that's the man from the school video." Rayhan turned, gently waved. The mom smiled. "Thank you for what you did." Rayhan nodded. "It wasn't just me. I just said what needed to be said." He boarded his flight, not away from something, but toward the next chapter. Sometimes the strongest leaders come from the quietest places, and sometimes the world only hears them after it laughs.